Do you think we're disconnected from farming?
Take a look at people these days. I think we're pretty disconnected.
It's very judgmental of you, Zaid.
This is
I
the
cannot
second time in a
believe-
row we're making a guest laugh in
Yeah.
the first 5 seconds, bro.
Well, it's funny too, because I don't watch sports a whole lot anymore, but I mean I grew up with sports, and I went to the March Madness college basketball games in San Antonio. I guess this was 3 weeks ago now, and social media talks about the bread and circus with sports a lot, and like I've always noticed that, but man, when I was there, it was the most jarring experience I've ever had. Literally, it was more often than not people were struggling just to walk up the stairs. That's how unhealthy everybody was. And then I remember it was like a Capital One blimp was flying around, like dropping coupons, and everyone was just like staring, trying to get the coupons. And I was just like, it was an out of body experience of what is going on, because that was really felt like bread and circus. Everyone's
Yeah.
eating garbage. Again, could hardly walk, and we're at sports games, and so it was just
Yeah.
insane to watch.
I mean, it's a common experience. Like if I don't like I rarely go to Disneyland, for example, but when I do, I'm like, what the fuck happened?
I mean, dude, I've had cousins fly out from Canada, and they're like, dude, what the hell's wrong with America? I'm like, what? And he's like, everyone's fat as shit. Like, I'm like, yeah. I used to be the type of person to go, that's a bit harsh, but it's sadly just too common.
What's like the first thing you notice when you leave an American airport and fly into an international airport, vice versa when you come back to America is because I remember when I flew into England, that was, even though England is starting to get more unhealthy too because of us, but that was jarring in itself. And then I came back and flew into New York, and I was like, oh, this is bad.
Mm.
Not on top of that too is the American airports, everyone's just dressed in slop because we feel like slop.
Yeah, pajamas, Elmo pajamas.
Yeah.
And shit.
I have a lot of questions, and we can take this in any direction here. But one of the most recent news that I've been reading about in terms of like a compilation of articles and whatnot is soil quality. That's something huge, I think, because we get the comparison of 2 oranges today were not the same as 2 oranges back in the day. And it has a lot to do with our crop and our, I guess, pesticide spray and all that. And I just want to further understand what the what low quality soil means and how it even began to be that way.
Mm.
You know,
So it goes beneath the ground in the soil there's just so much microbiology going on. And so there's a massive soil food web that goes on with like, I mean, you can't even see it. So that's why there's the saying, if you have a teaspoon of soil, I believe it's a billion microorganisms in a teaspoon of soil.
Some insane number.
It's
Yeah.
insane. 1 tablespoon of
I wouldn't be surprised if it's a
soil
trillion, to
in
be honest.
hand. I gotta find this because it's mind-boggling how contains more. That's right. So in 1 tablespoon of soil, it contains more microorganisms than there are people on this earth. And so when you think about that, and then you think about whenever we're doing massive tillage of the soil, which is just breaking it all apart, paired with the fact that monocropping, so you're only producing 1 single crop for just rows and rows and rows. So that's why when you go to the Midwest, all you see is corn and soy.
Mhm.
I mean, that's the big thing in America. If we talk about the subsidies, it incentivizes farmers to just produce corn, soy, and wheat. And then that's whenever you get into the whole fuel aspect too, because then a lot of the corn is just repurposed for fuel. It's also repurposed for all of the cattle and whatnot. But when you think about that, that just destroys the microbiology under the soil. And then what happens with that is something like the Dust Bowl. So that was like a slow burner too, because that dates back to the 1800s, whenever they passed a few acts, like the Homestead Act, I think it was 1862, to where they were just trying to incentivize people to go out west, because there's just obviously so much land to be used. So that's what happened. So many people migrated out there, and some of them were farmers on the East Coast. And when you think about it in the 1800s too, pretty much everyone was growing their own food to some capacity. It was very common to have a couple chickens and a pig. But then when they went out west, just heavy machinery. If you look in the pictures, they just have these giant tractors. And again, monocropping too with corn, soy, and wheat then. But over time, that just destroys the soil. And then there's no soil organic matter, and that's what actually holds water capacity. And so the saying is, if you increase your organic matter in the soil by 1%, you can, for per acre, 20,000 gallons of water.
Wow.
And Will Harris has done a really good job of showcasing this for White Oak Pastures. He's shared some videos of water runoff with his farm compared to his neighbor's farm that's conventionally raised. And they show just like the water runoff, essentially, all of the soil is leaching into the water because it's not storing underground. And so that's why massive flooding happens everywhere, and why you see, say it rains a lot, but then you just see dry, barren ground after that. It's because it didn't keep any of that water.
Mhm.
And so that's very huge. And that's where regenerative agriculture can come into play. I guess I should back up too. The last thing that's also bad is the fact that we don't have a lot of ruminant animals anymore on pastures. And I mean, that's when getting into the weeds of it with like the government and whatnot. That's like the big overarching picture is they're trying to take all of that away.
Yeah, you have the Bill Gates of the world who are trying to say that cows are a problem for the planet.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck planet are you on, dude?
Well, he's on his own planet. He has a major plan to control that whole process too. And it's very, if you follow like just his paper trail, but then also a lot of his videos, it's pretty clear cut what he's trying to do because he is the largest farm landowner in America. He is one of the largest shareholders of John Deere, which John Deere has a lot of corruption going on too, to where you're essentially becoming a servant. You don't actually own the machinery. They're doing what Apple does with repairs. So one, the equipment doesn't hold itself over time like with Apple with the phones, because now they kill the battery over time, so you have to buy it. But then also whenever you do repairs, you have to get a Apple specific maintenance. You can't repair it individually. The same way as doing that with John Deere, to where you have to work with a specialist. You might not know. It might take a week or two just to get somebody, and then they give you the quotes, and obviously they're just destroying you financially for something that could cost a couple $100 and maybe an hour of your time. Now it can cost thousands of dollars in weeks. And so that's massive. And then thirdly, there's this huge thing going on social media that's being talked about from farmers right now, is aluminum in our soil. There's a lot that's going on with that, to where a farmer, he tested his soils to where he has 5 times the aluminum that he should have. And where people are trying to figure out where that is, but it's pretty much showing from coming up in the
geoengineering.
Yep, cloud seeding and all of that. And then there's videos way back of Bill and Melinda Gates talking about creating GMO seeds that can grow in aluminum-rich soil. And then he goes on to Jimmy Fallon. I shared this on my Regenaissance page a couple weeks ago, but Jimmy Fallon was talking to him about AI and what AI is going to replace. And so he brings up the example of like baseball. AI is never going to replace that, because we want to... it's going to be, it takes away the humanity aspect of that, but like entertainment purposes, you can't really replicate that. But now he's trying to say that he's trying to pretty much wipe out all farmers and replace it with AI on the land that he owns, using the seeds that he owns, selling the food that he grows.
That's so absurd, man.
And so that's why he does all this research in Africa too, is to figure out that stuff so he can bring that over to America. Like even before like I got into agriculture, I always viewed him as that true Bond villain, because he's that nerd that actually just wants to control everything, but he's using his little nerdy, happy-go-lucky appeal. But to me, he is one of the biggest enemies of our food, and especially our sovereignty, which is why he's trying to take it out. He just wants power and control.
So tying into the Regenaissance, because this is something you started, how many years ago did you start Regenaissance?
I launched May 23rd, 2023.
Okay. So tell people what that is all about. Like, what is the mission statement of Regenaissance? Because I know you have taglines like Raw's Law and specific things around that, but what would you say to people around that?
So 2 things. The biggest thing is reconnecting us back to where our food is grown, and that's through raising awareness and education. But then also, secondly, being the microphone for all of the farmers and ranchers and all the other folks in ag that don't have a voice, that's been completely stripped away. And so initially I started out as an apparel brand, and I still have apparel, and we'll continue to do that. But my biggest focus is through media, through my podcast. If you were to go to my Instagram and Twitter, it would not... Like when I started out as apparel, you would have never guessed it's apparel, because it's all educational focused. But then also importantly, I try to hone in on the raising awareness, because people just are not aware at all about the food system in general, but then also how we've gotten here And then lastly, what's happening to all of our farmers and ranchers now, because they're just getting decimated, and it's all by design. So lastly, too, I have this podcast to where I talk to farmers and ranchers, and that has been incredible because just hearing their stories, it's clear that this message needs to be heard more and more. Because when you think about a piece of land has been in a family for 5, 6 generations, even before the 1900s, and you have all of that wealth and knowledge just passed down from generation to generation, all of those rich stories and just rich history. But then also, most people have never visited a farm or ranch, and so I didn't until I was 27. I'm 31 now, and I guess my whole reasoning behind all this too is just what I went through. I try to have people avoid going through what I've gone through, and that be their wake-up call. Because, man, we'll get into it, but yeah, it's been leading up to May 23rd, 2023 was a hell of a journey.
Yeah. A lot of people can resonate with that story too. We'll get into that for sure.
Yeah, I'd like to hear that story. I'm a story guy, but and I think stories are important just because it helps the connection between a fellow human and another.
And well, too, I want to add why stories are so powerful too is, say with food, for example, or with raw milk, we're told so many things that are like fear-based. They instill fear for like raw milk or just farming and food in general. Stories can just bypass that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And that's why I try to go through that is, all right, here's the government telling us that farmers and ranchers are bad, or here's vegans telling us farmers and ranchers are abusing and raping their animals and are in it for the money. Well, here's what they're actually doing and what they're sharing and whatnot, and it just destroys that.
No, it's amazing, and it's also super clever what you're doing because at the end of the day, a lot of us think of food as just something that we need to do really quickly so we can get back to work, right? But what it really matters, since our nutrients are just disappearing, and to have a platform and a brand around all of this to kind of put more importance on food, especially through the false narrative that's been going around. This is another key part of helping humanity, which is super awesome, and I'm super stoked for getting more into this. I think I wanted to ask a question regarding soil as well, and it was, what are some things that we could potentially do to rescue that? And do you know what time frame, like where it lays and how long it may take for something to be regenerated into good health?
That's a good question.
Because I'm thinking of soil as like a human body at this point, where it's like, okay, it's so dead, we can rescue it, but how? And how long does it take?
And they basically say that we have like what, half a generation of soil left, something like that.
Yeah, I know.
It's insane.
I don't know. That's actually a good point. I'm not sure on that part because I remember I've written on that too a while ago, and I haven't seen any updated articles. So I'm not sure if we're still on track for that. I mean, my assumption is probably. Can you repeat your question though? Because I already.
Yeah. So since soil is dead, how do we revive it? And if we can revive it, how long do you think it would take?
So that would require a lot more people growing your food, and also we talked before the show going on ranching. So cattle and just ruminant animals in general, like bison, are absolutely necessary to bring that soil back. When you think of the Great Plains era with the bison, the grasses were so tall they came up to horses. Wow. And why was that? It was because we had 60 million bison, to where you could literally hear them running from a mile or two away. You could be on a train and shoot, depending on where you're at, you could point your gun and shoot, and you're going to hit a bison because we had so many.
Wow.
But now we only have a couple 100,000 bison. Now ranching is getting destroyed. I also mentioned before the podcast, nearly 110,000 ranches have closed in the last 5 years. And it's only getting more difficult to actually profit being a rancher. And so I can't give a good definitive answer of how long it'll take, because the biggest problem is we don't have enough people to do this stuff. Yeah, that's a really tough question to answer.
It's a big question.
Yeah, it is a big question. And I mean, I'm still searching for answers, so it's kind of like, even though it is probably just a good thought to sit on. I
Yeah,
think.
for sure.
Uh,
Because there's just so many problems within agriculture, but the biggest problem above all else is it's not it's really hard to profit and make a living for yourself, your family, and whoever else you're supporting. But then number two is thinking big picture. We don't have enough people that are going to want to ranch and farm, especially from the younger generations. So that problem will, if we can fix that problem, that will really help with the soil. With your question,
God damn, social media.
I mean, that's a big part of it, man.
As good as it is, it's just
It's a
insane.
manifestation of that.
I was talking to a friend yesterday, and I'm like, look, I'd like to have a kid one day, and if I have that kid, I'm gonna make sure that he enjoys going to the park to look at the swan or kick it at the pond, not just be on a screen. The whole point of like when I say social media, I mean you're gonna end up there regardless, but it starts with an iPad,
yeah,
you know. And it's like I feel like that's a huge a huge part that plays into why there aren't many people interested in farming, especially new young generation. And you need to be starting pretty young because that's like your most fit and able time for you to take on that load and such a big responsibility, essentially. And then one thing we forget about, I think, is how massive of a role farming takes on the entirety of the population of the world.
What's the glue that holds everything together, right?
Literally, you think sometimes, dude, you're so busy that your mind doesn't think about like where this apple came from. It's just, I mean, we just go to Albertsons, you know, which is a horrible place to go buy fruit. But
Don't go to Albertsons.
But it's just like it's just there for you and it has a price tag, and that's like
Yeah.
you don't give things much thought, and that sucks because I don't want people to have to have an emergency and then be in a position to where they're sick and they just want to get better for them to start thinking about all this stuff.
like
Right? You want to
yeah,
prevent that.
yeah. Like I do not want them to have to watch their brother get cancer and watch their mother suffer and both pass. For that to be your wake up call,
Yeah.
and then also because I went through my own health hell too, and yeah, that's why with the whole Maha stuff, because in order for this to work a long time, we have to have a massive paradigm shift of what you're just describing. Because now with social media and streaming and video games are massive, but then also it just feels like when thinking about the future, just like hopeless and helpless. And so people are already from like a default state just have a very negative lens, and that's why for me going back to this the disconnection from our food, when you actually go to a farm and ranch, speak to the farmer or rancher, see their family, see the animals or the produce they're growing, and just see that God's work at play essentially, and then you actually have their farm fresh food and you might eat with them or just eat with your family. The wheels really start spinning whenever that happens, and you also taste the food and realize what the heck, this is not really from most grocery stores that I have. This tastes so much better because that was the first thing I noticed whenever I think about his name is Jordan Hedberg, awesome rancher in Colorado. I visited him. This was in 2022, and I remember eating his farm fresh beef with their garden, and my mouth literally waters every time I think about it because that was the first time I realized, holy smokes, I've never had anything like this from a grocery store ever. And then going back to like your comments on like the quality of the produce and whatnot is drastically, it varies. Because then I've had pomegranate to where there was no taste at all, and I could tell this is probably there's probably 6 months old. You have no idea. And then I've had fresh, really fresh pomegranate. I'm just like, oh, okay, how did that happen? To where some fruit there's literally no taste at all. Even with berries and stuff too, it's kind of wild going to a store and you buy fruit. There's no taste to that.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that. And that's because just poor farming.
I'll tell you what, man. Like the experience of going local and buying more of your food local is a really cool one because ultimately, it like when you go to the grocery store to buy food, it feels fucking dead. Like there's no relationship there. You're just lazy. You're walking into a store.
Sitting
Oh,
under
this
blue
looks
light.
good, and then you pick it up. Yeah, sitting under isolated blue light, which in my opinion actually degrades the nutrient profile of the food.
That's a good point.
But then when you go to like a small, let's say a person who owns like a little bit of a garden and they have, raw honey and raw butter or whatever, like that's a totally different quality of experience. and it feels alive. Like you are genuinely connected and tapped into, I guess, nature, right?
Mhm.
Because that's the best form of nature, right? So it's like, I guess the point of this question is to like explain more of the experience of just being on a farm, because most people have no idea. Explain, I guess, the reverence or the beautiful aspects of that in your mind.
Oh yeah, I love that question. So the first thing is definitely a completely different lifestyle. The whole Yellowstone show, I remember hearing friends talk about wanting to get land and just like start farming. And most people definitely have a very, very sensationalized viewpoint on agriculture. Especially with this whole trad movement, getting off the grid, buying land. And then yeah, it's nice to have that as a North Star. Don't get me wrong, I want more and more people to have that North Star, but we have to have realistic expectations. So the farm I worked on was in rural Pennsylvania, beautiful, but this nearby town was the population of I think 2,500. I was surrounded by the Amish, and so I'm in rural country. And so there's no neighbors hardly at all. There's no internet on the farm, no internet. And so whenever I had to, because this was when I was really starting to use Twitter, I would go to the nearby town that had really crappy internet at the cafe, but that was the best Wi-Fi they had. Just schedule out all of my writing and then come back to the farm and do everything. But essentially, it was the same schedule every week. Monday at 6:30 a.m. we have our weekly meetings to plan out the week. Or no, this was Tuesday. Sorry, Tuesday morning to plan out the week, and then I'm working from 7:30 to 12. Have an hour and a half lunch, and then immediately get back into doing afternoon chores. And typically would be just out in the fields picking produce, literally sitting on a bucket, hand picking beans, whatever, which definitely humbles you a lot. It sucks. It sucks a lot, but that's one thing. I see this on Twitter now too with from I don't want to get too political, but the left I've seen mentioned with specifically with agriculture of hiring people for like picking berries for the summer.
Sure.
I really want that back, especially from the younger generations, because it's going to suck, especially when you're a 15-year-old kid and you're used to just playing video games, but you learn a lot. And not just that, then you're tasting the fruit, because I would get to pick and I would still eat the green beans. They taste so good. And so even though it still was kind of backbreaking work and literally had a sore back and whatnot, I'm still out in the sunshine all day. So peaceful just hearing nature do its thing. I shouldn't. Sometimes nature is cruel to hear, but a lot of times it's just you're hearing the birds chirping and all that.
Yeah.
And then I'm just talking with the farmers. And then I usually would end about 4:30 or 5 p.m. and then just have the rest of the night to do whatever. But then we'd also do dinners as a collective. The cool aspect on this farm is, so for lunch, one of the workers is making the lunch for everybody. And you're just using everything on the farm, because this farm, it was 240 acres. They had all the produce in the world. They had awesome fruit, and then they had cows, chicken, sheep, turkey, pigs, and rabbits. And so
Wow.
I had a really good experience of just diversity all throughout the board for that. And it was the best food I've ever had. We used butter from the Amish farm, raw butter, still to this day the best butter I've ever had. They also had raw A2 chocolate milk, still to this day the best chocolate milk I've ever had.
God.
It was insane. But then also for dinner, it was optional, but you could eat as a family. And I remember the first day I had dinner with everybody, and I vividly remember like the kids asking like, "Can you pass the salt?" and all this, and it was just like another out of body experience, because I hadn't experienced that in so long, eating together as a family. Because I used to do that growing up with my parents and my brother, but then once my brother went for college and I eventually left for college, we didn't do that. And then I noticed the shift over time too for Americans. We started eating as a family, but it was in front of a TV, because that's what we started doing, to where it went from going from the kitchen table to upstairs in our bonus room with our TV. And that was cool in itself, but now looking back, you're not having the connections like we are right here.
Yeah.
And so it was just beautiful to have on that farm, to see that too. The interesting thing is it's very exhausting. And mine's a little bit different case too, because my health started getting a lot worse at that time. And that was just because I didn't know what was going on. I ended up having undiagnosed Hashimoto's, and so working on a farm was literally one of the worst things to do with that, because with Hashimoto's, it's a severe form of hypothyroidism, so my thyroid's not working properly, which means my energy production tanks. Um, with sleep, I remember I would fall asleep at like 8:30 because I was so exhausted, and then I'd wake up at 5:30 as if I didn't sleep at all.
Wow.
Oh my God.
And so that became hellish in itself to where I ended up leaving the farm early. So I just wanted to add that because I should add that context. Because despite that, that farm I think about every single day, seeing how that family was together. Because it was a husband and wife, they had 3 kids. I think it was like a 5, 3, and 1 year old. And so I got to really see them be homeschooled, but then also being outside all the time. Farmers markets were Thursday through Sunday, and sometimes the kids would go out for that and just talk with the customers. And they really just wanted to be outside and help, and then also just do their kids' things of just exploring. And so that really got me thinking of potentially eventually having my own farm or ranch and really wanting to have a family on there. I ended up being the default farmers market guy, so I ended up doing all 4 every week, and that was really cool. But then also I got to see the world of farmers markets because this is a very tough problem for agriculture. Of okay, so most people are disconnected and don't buy from a farm or ranch, but say they start waking up to that and thinking about supporting a farm or ranch. Typically, you would go to a farmers market. But for a farmer and rancher, from an economic standpoint, it's actually brutal for them because it's typically just like a social hour. And so it can be to build like a email list and just build relationships. And so I don't know how I feel overall about farmers markets. It's a means to an end, but I guess this is where direct to consumer comes into play.
You don't have enough volume to be able to sell in a farmer's market setting.
A lot of people go and they don't buy anything. They just talk and then they.
Interesting.
It's something to do without
Yeah.
necessarily purchasing it.
Yep.
Yeah. I get
It's like going to a mall. Like a lot of people go to malls for just social. Well, back when malls were a thing.
People go to a farmer's market and don't buy
Yeah,
shit.
it's like window
It's
shopping.
very common. If
Yeah.
and if
What
you
the fuck?
and if you were to hear farmers and ranchers, they would say this a lot because a lot of people have stopped being a vendor at farmers markets too, and that's starting to be co-opted from like bigger cities to where there's now people that will just sell stuff that they buy from a grocery store.
Oh my God.
So even that's getting co-opted.
What?
But then going back to that farm in itself too, it was incredible at the same time because you'd wake up and immediately go do all the farm chores. So, feed the pigs, make sure they have water, rotate cows, rotate the chicken pens, rotate the turkey pens, get out the chickens and turkeys too.
Mm.
So that was awesome to really see how that cycle really worked. And then a lot of it for them was just figuring out when to pick certain produce and just game planning how to go for the farmers markets. Because then they also had a farm share. So on Wednesdays, people that are signed up to that can go visit the farm and then buy stuff from there. So that whole experience was just awesome. And then Saturday, you do the typical chores and do some things you need to do, eat lunch, do afternoon chores, and then you have the rest of the Saturday off. But man, pretty much you don't have a lot of quote unquote free time. And that's another thing that people don't really understand from that's why I say it's a lifestyle.
Is that the most underappreciated aspect of farming lifestyle? Just the amount of work that goes into it that people don't understand?
Absolutely.
They don't appreciate it, dude.
No.
Because everything has to be scheduled.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, if you go back,
Because you're not just growing your food too.
yeah,
You have to for this farm. I mean, he had help and would eventually hire help, but you're repairing fence. You are a mechanic. You are a
Everything.
plumber. Yeah, veterinarian. Especially in super rural parts, and especially if you don't have the funds. So that goes back to the financial aspect of it all is crazy. So you have ranchers that can't even make do, but yeah, you're expecting them to do all those things too that I just said. It's I try to bring up the veterans too because I don't want to say the farmer should have a farmer appreciation day, but we have lost the plot on gratitude with that to where they are not appreciated at all. And then in terms of a suicide rate, farmers have a worse suicide rate than veterans.
Really?
Yep.
What the hell?
that needs to be changed. Yeah, we need to bring back the value on farming and farmers. This is insane. I think we're slowly less and less becoming less human.
It strips the humanity aspect of it.
Yeah.
And that's why I try to I share above all else, like shake your rancher's hand, because we have lost the human connection. That's why I truly believe the disconnection from our food is the root of all of our problems.
Yeah. Okay. So a huge part of this is that people feel like they they don't have a part in society, so then they don't recognize the people that do.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Call it what you want, man, but
And then you just
that's
stay
not right.
inside all day too. That's another thing too, is you just don't go outside and stay inside, and then you have your phone, and then everything that's social media, video games, everything's just distractions.
And everything's a joke and a meme, you know.
as if going to the grocery store wasn't bad enough, right? Now we have Uber Eats and DoorDash, and you just get that shit delivered to your house.
Oh.
And now you have payment plans for DoorDash.
Now you have payment plans. Bro, this is like it's like they found a way to bastardize food even more.
And this is why I say a massive paradigm shift needs to happen too, is because now we just think everything can come quick and easy, like Ozempic. And you can't cheat nature. You can't cheat all of this. You can't cheat with Ozempic. There's drastic consequences that you'll face. But then in terms of like restoring our health and food, we have to realize this is going to take decades to fix, because all of the problems we're being faced right now with our food has been happening from the 50s and even before that. And so it's just slow burner. But we have no long-term thinking at all. And so that's why, again, if you see the food and everything, the connection with the farming, I think that will start opening up your mind for that.
Yeah. Crazy, man. We need to reconnect with the things that matter and the things that actually keep this world moving. And this is a huge part of it. Unfortunately, I wish I can say, hey, man, we're all good to go. But it's like that percentage is slowly closing in on a smaller percentage of people that actually believe in this now. And the rest are so addicted to Red 40 and hot Cheetos.
Well,
I mean, if my apples don't come in flaming hot, I don't want them.
Jesus, dude. It can get very dark, I think, for people listening to this, because the stats are, against us, and there's so much momentum going in the wrong direction. What gives you hope?
Raw milk.
Well, I hope.
I mean, raw milk, definitely raw milk.
A2 raw chocolate milk gives you hope.
Yes,
right?
Definitely. There is a lot that gives me hope still, and that is the human spirit. I mean, I'm a historian at heart too, and so that's why. That's why I'm coming on this podcast, and why I'm trying to meet as many people like you guys and others that get it, is we can fast track that. And so, that's why I'm doing that road trip come July, visiting farms and ranches to really help drive inspiration. In terms of like going back to like the learned helplessness and whatnot, I know there's a lot of people out there, especially guys, that have no calling or mission, and they have no drive because of that. Farming and ranching and just growing your own food is one avenue potentially, to where I know there's a lot of people out there that is the answer. Paired with just all the farmers and ranchers I continue to meet, they are such incredible people. And then Maha. I know Maha is leaving out the farmers and ranchers as it stands right now, but I think collectively it's really helping drive that paradigm shift again. Because, there's so much that's just messed up from a health standpoint in America. And then I would say, above all else, there are so many people like our age and whatnot building their own. We have these health brands right here. There's just so many people building their own things to where I think it's eventually going to come together. That's my hope and plan. But we also, who knows after these 4 years what will happen. And that's why I'm just trying to do as much as I can in these 4 years to really drive conversations.
What's a subject you really want to discuss that I don't think gets discussed from your perspective, in your realm?
We as consumers, it's interesting, like the conscious consumer, or like being educated and all that. I know we talked a little bit about this before this podcast started. I've noticed people will start learning a little bit about something, say about your food, and then they stop. They stop learning, or they stop wanting to learn from a farmer and rancher, and they still don't actually get connected to their food and actually support or shake the hand that feeds them. They might buy food that gets shipped to their door from a farmer and rancher, which is still great. you're still directly supporting, but you're not seeing the connection at all. And so people are saying that they're supporting, good quality food, but if you still go to a grocery store, if there's farmers and ranchers around you that you could be directly supporting, but yet you're talking about Maha and wanting regeneratively raised and whatnot, you are hypocritical as all hell, because you're still just supporting the problem, essentially. And that continues to get worse and worse, especially with the whole like holistic health space continue to grow. There's a lot of people that latch on to regenerative and they just start taking that and going, and they're only furthering this problem to where now, as consumers, it's like grain finished beef is completely demonized, or conventional ag as a whole is completely demonized. I made this tweet last week. So Gabe Brown, or even like Will Harris of White Oak Pastures, both these guys were conventional farmers, and then they transitioned to regeneratively raised and just regenerative farms. But yet these two people are just completely idolized by a lot of consumers. Those are the same people that, had they met Will Harris and Gabe Brown, had they been conventional farmers, they would have been saying all the garbage that they say in present day to conventional farmers. But just because of, so yeah, does that make sense what I said right there? Because I want to put a heavy emphasis on that. Is like, I notice people are talking on Joe South and all these regenerative farmers, but a lot of them weren't regenerative. But yet they are making the scapegoat of all the conventional farmers, saying they're destroying our land willingly and XYZ, when a lot of them are not. There's trade-offs for everything, and especially in this industry, going with the financing of everything, it is tough, and especially in rural parts. That's another thing too, is a lot of people are just in big cities, and most have never actually experienced rural America.
Take a plane ride over the country, man. Like,
it's
you know how
entirely
much
different
fucking space there is.
Yeah, and that's the whole. That's
crazy.
That's what's so funny and sad, because that's what I've done the last 4 years. Is I've driven probably 150,000 miles around America. It makes.
And you thought you were a road tripper, bro?
No, I was like, he's topping me.
But it makes me more patriotic and loves this country more and more, because it doesn't matter if I'm in Mississippi or where else. There are beautiful parts around America in every state. There's beautiful people in every state, more so than others. But people just don't travel, and if they do, they typically go to like Europe or somewhere else around the outside of the country. And so we're not just we're just disconnected overall in so much. But I mean, it makes sense because America is huge, and that's just another tough problem to tackle. Because whenever going back to like supporting directly, I understand it's very hard. I mean, we're in LA. I know they have massive farmers markets, but it's tough, and so that's a very tough problem to tackle too. I don't have any crazy ideas how to go about that right now. That's kind of what I'm trying to do, is figuring out how I can help in any way I can with all of that. But say in Austin, in the context of Austin, there's surrounding farms and ranches everywhere. And so in those instances, when people say they can't support, then that's just so lazy.
Yeah.
So that's why you just have to take a hard look and actually Google. That's another thing too. It's so funny to me. It's just where to go to find a farm or ranch. You can literally just Google farms and ranches near my area.
Yeah.
Like, we have offloaded responsibility in everything. That was a huge thing with COVID. I know people just want to be told things, but that's another thing, is you just have to start taking some personal responsibility, especially if you're a parent or want to be a parent. Because I'm sick and tired of hearing, I would do anything for my kids, even die for them. Then fucking live for them. Like, I'm so sick of that. And so, I don't know. I continue to go back to the paradigm shift. Like, you just need to take responsibility and actually do some research. And I know there's a lot of information out there, and that's very challenging. And that's why I'm trying to go about it from the angle I'm going about it, is I'm talking to farmers and ranchers. I'm doing all my research and trying to have that shared and displayed for everybody to see, and then make the decisions. But then above all else, go to a farmer and ranch, ask the questions, and start learning, because a lot of farms and ranches are more than welcome. They want people out there to talk. They love talking on all this stuff. And so I think that's huge. And then on that too, if a farmer or rancher doesn't like answer a question or doesn't want you to visit, there's something to be said about that too. And so you just have to take matters in your own hands. We're just kind of, we don't take any responsibility for that.
Dude, I love what you said. I would die for my kids. Well, how about live for them, damn it?
Yeah.
Well, because I think about my own family too, man. Like, it saddens me a lot like I believe I'll be reunited with my mom and brother in the long run. But like it really saddens me to think about the fact that whenever I have a ranch long term with my family, that my mom and my brother won't ever be able to be there.
Mm.
And then, yeah, that was the last tidbit on that. It's just it's very tough, I know, as a parent, especially whenever in today's society, to where a lot of it is disrupted to where you have to have dual incomes and daycare. There's so many problems with all that, but I still believe that rather than say spending an hour watching TV with the kids, maybe go outside for a walk and sit at a park for an hour.
Yeah,
Like
I
there's
mean,
these small little
yeah.
changes that you can make that really compiles over time. Because I think about my life after my brother died. The very first change I made that helped snowball everything was go outside and take walks.
Yeah,
I was
so
literally,
simple but so profound.
yep.
Mm. And tying into the interconnectedness of things, I think that I don't have much experience on a farm. I will admit, I've seen farms. I've been on a couple, but I haven't worked on a farm. But something that I hear time and time again, and something that I have studied, is the interconnectedness involved in just the having so much biodiversity in one place, and that has always astonished me because I'm reminded by, let's say, people who try to think that they're wise enough to mess around with nature cycles and this whole biodiversity, but then it ends up creating second and third order consequences. So, from your experience, have you seen, like, I don't know if this makes sense, but have you seen that interconnectedness at play in terms of you mess around with one variable and the whole thing gets fucked up?
This can go to like the actual microbiology of the soil. Going back to that, is once you disrupt that food soil web, it could some of the consequences of that would just be crazy weeds and noxious weeds out of that. That's the biggest thing that I've noticed would be that. I'm trying to think of another example.
Because if you notice, it's kind of the same thing that centralized medicine does to people's health. They treat the symptoms, but they don't address the root cause.
I mean, this goes with regenerative agriculture. And like, say you add cows and then you start actually intensively managing, you'll really start noticing the grasses with that, and then the soil quality of all of that for sure.
Wow.
But then also the interconnectedness. So I grew up a Christian, but then pretty much my whole adult life I was agnostic. And the first thing that made me start thinking about life and everything was, again, my brother dying. But then I remember once I started really being interested in agriculture and talking to farmers and ranchers, I would always notice majority of them have some type of religion or faith.
Mm.
And so I knew there was something to that. And I remember when I was trying to figure out which farm I was going to go on, so I was using WOOFing, which is an acronym WWOOF, which stands for Worldwide Opportunities on Organic Farms. It's a cool organization. And essentially, in exchange for your labor, you get housing and food. And so I found this farm in Pennsylvania. I remember talking to the owner, and he had lost a parent and a sibling, similar time frame to pretty much what was happening with my life. But then he also started talking about faith and whatnot. And for some reason, I really latched onto that. And again, I was not religious at the time, but I started working on the farm, and I really understood. You see God's work at play. I can't. It's really hard to put into words too. That's why I always say
I understand you though. Like it's more feeling based. Like
it's
as you're
very
describing
feeling
it.
based.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I would go out after work and I would just sit there because it was very hilly. How the farm I worked on was laid out is essentially there's a middle part with a lot of the houses and barns that was flat, and then both sides just essentially went up hills. And what was really cool is they had a four-wheeler, so I just whip that around. But then I would go up to the hills and just have a beautiful view of the surrounding Appalachian mountains, and you just sit and reflect. And I remember that pretty much planted the seed to where eventually a year after that I ended up getting baptized. But yeah, you see God's work at play like crazy. But then also once you do animal processing, because I remember the first time I ever did any of that was with rabbits. And so I remember taking the life of the first rabbit. And, I'm typically, even though I'm a former vegan, but stuff like that, even before like vegan and all that, I typically would feel like that stuff wouldn't have bothered me. The first time I took the life, it was just interesting. I wouldn't say it bothered me, but it was just
Conflicting?
not conflicting. I don't even know how to put in the words in that either. I felt honored, I guess, in being in the whole process of taking care of that rabbit, and then realizing that I'm literally using this for sustenance to sustain myself as a human being and the community around this area. Because then I'd also reflect on, a couple years prior to that, whenever I was on a different ranch in Colorado, I went to processing day for chickens, and the owner would do the ceremony of the chickens to just essentially give thanks to their lives. And so that also added that piece to pretty much God's work to me too, because that goes to like the whole morals and ethics aspect of animals, should we be eating them, but then also the quality of care. To me, it made a lot of sense, and that added to just the connectedness of it all, of taking care of the animal, being there for its last day of its life, but then also actually consuming the animal in a respectful way, because after that we would go with the family and have family meals together, and it's nourishing and you're together as a community. I think that's how it's meant to be.
So you can see and feel the cycle now.
Oh yeah.
The cycle of nature, and it weighs heavy.
It does weigh heavy because
Yeah.
it's life and death cycle too. That's another thing that when you're disconnected from all that, to me, that's also the root of veganism, is their disconnection from our food. Because I was vegan for 2.5 years, and most vegans never gone to a farm or ranch. A lot of them are typically living in cities, and so they're going based off of what they see online and what they hear. And there's a lot of nasty stuff of videos shared online, and that's true. But then there's also a lot of bullshit that they don't realize with all of that. And to me, that's just because of the disconnected aspect of it all. So, for example, I'd go out. I remember one time I went out to do animal chores for the turkey pen, especially. And I go in the turkey pen, there's a dead turkey. And so I got to put on the four-wheeler, take it out to the pigs, and they eat it. But then on the inverse, I went out there one time, and there's 2 new lambs. And so you see the constant life and death and life cycle of it all, to where, I don't know, I just think about vegans a lot and all of that. And life is death at the same time for me.
Yeah, that's my hunch as to why people are attracted to those hardcore nature videos on Instagram. It's because you're trying to get something very primal that you don't get in daily modern life.
Yeah.
It's like, why else do you watch the videos? Because you understand that nature's wisdom is right there for you to see. Like, yes, it's life, but there's duality. There's also death.
It's coded this way.
And sometimes it's very hardcore death. Like, yeah, a bear will fucking start eating the ass of a sheep or something. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's not always all fresh rainbows and bunny rabbits jumping around the landscape like cartoons,
Yeah. Like mountain lions are always dying, but you would just never see a mountain lion that's dead because it's already been eaten. So it's like you could just already... It's there. It's there for
disconnection, man. It's disconnection.
And it forms like a utopian viewpoint of it all too, because that's what I realized I had was, I didn't actually look into the research of animal protein, realizing that's just the center of our diet. But then I just thought I could just survive and thrive as a human without animal protein, and just thinking on, just on that is the fact that I don't know. I just 2.5 years of that was way too long.
I don't know how you did it, bro.
I was very convicted in my beliefs with all that, but then I realized once I was on the farm of how wrong I was with all of that.
Yeah, I would assume the toughest season is winter, right?
Yeah.
What was the toughest thing about it?
Yeah,
I know,
what does
besides
that
like
look like?
it being cold and like the weather changes and all that, but is there something in terms of like harvesting or animal work that is slightly more difficult, or
It's just the unexpectedness of it all, because like I said, it's a lifestyle, and so you might have plans, but then life decides otherwise, that you have to take care of, say an animal got out of the pen or something like that. And especially in the winter, that just adds time. So the winter just makes the most basic things adds on like 30 extra minutes because of snow and whatnot. So that can kind of be a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Fortunately, it didn't happen when I was on this farm, but I know in terms of water, like water pipes are really easy to freeze. And so that's disastrous. Fortunately, that never happened with this, but I remember him talking about that can happen. And so just making sure all of that. And so I wasn't the owner, but like that thought would stress the hell out of me constantly.
Yeah.
I never thought about that.
Rightfully so. I mean, if I heard that, that's the only thing I'd be thinking about.
Yeah, because the cost of that, but then also how you're going to start getting water for the animals after. Yeah, there's so many just variables. That's the thing with farming. I mean, it's just weather dependent.
Yeah. You have to be on top of it.
Well, I'm going to ask a question on this. Like, from your experience with real high-quality regenerative ag, or even regular farmers and whatnot, how wise are these people?
Very.
Yeah. Because to deal with all of that systems thinking and all, like, I can only imagine
This
that you'd
reminds
have
me
to be super
of
wise.
Dry Creek Ranch. Dwayne.
Like, oh, Dwayne,
God, that,
Dry-
that Dry Creek Ranch sounds so familiar.
the Dwayne, the old guy with the beard. I think he was on
Spitting
Chris.
wisdom. He has a YouTube channel where he just like talk. He's like, "Come here, son. I'm gonna talk to you."
Come here,
You
son.
know?
Okay, yes,
With a cigar.
yes.
Yeah.
That guy's awesome.
He's dope. I like
Yeah,
that guy.
he's cool.
Yeah. I've learned a lot from him, man.
Yeah, that's funny.
Well, there's a real argument to be made that if you're in charge of a farm and you have to think this way, like you become a very wise character over
And
time.
you're built in and grounded in to nature.
Yeah,
like,
literally.
into life.
That's why I realized how bullshit growing up was. You can't be like the jack of all trades, master of none. I'm for that now. Like, we've always been taught that you should specialize. No, we have always been, like, going back to being a carpenter, mechanic, all of that. That's how we've always been and how we should be. But because society kind of stripped that away, because I remember always, all the time in school, that's what I was taught, to not be overgeneralized with all that, to not even bother.
Mm.
And that in itself is disastrous, especially for men. We can be quick learners. It was crazy watching the farm owner in terms of like the wisdom. He's so quick thinking with, like, for example, when we try to corral pigs, he would just guide us and tell us what to do. And it worked typically. And if it didn't, he'd have something else to try. And yeah, you have to be very quick thinking. And that's why, again, wanting to be the microphone and them sharing their stories is people don't realize the wealth of knowledge that these folks have, and they're salt of the earth. And obviously, another thing with, because I say we're in a soy-ciety, not society, because we still are in a soy-ciety. I mean, this goes with school, and it's just how school systems are forced now. Everything's black and white. There's no nuance or any talk of that. And so when talking about agriculture, there's so much nuance with everything, even with going with like the grain finish and all that. There's so much nuance that's not discussed. And so that's why consumers now equate grain finished beef is unhealthy for consumers, which is just not true. Some grain finished is bad. It depends on the grain. But a lot of these cows were on grass pasture lands most of their life. And so even like that, yeah, there's just so many examples of nuance that's not discussed. And that goes part of the paradigm shift of just the ability to think with logic and reason. That's why I was so lucky with my brother. He instilled that with me from an early age. And so that's just how I've always been. School doesn't teach that. And I mean, to me, that's by design too. That's another conversation, but that's why.
Yeah.
No, that's why.
That's
Shout out to Rockefeller.
That's why farming and ranching is great too. And I think that's part of why it's being attacked. It's the reality of things, of humanity. And
well, it's decentralized. And
And
what happens
yeah,
when you have a centralized paradigm or system? You have control with a few. And if you try to destroy that by bringing decentralized concepts, then obviously you're trying to take the fucking power and money away from them. So of course it's going to be pushed back on, you know? It's like it's the most obvious thing, but people somehow don't pick up on that.
no, yeah,
It's the way it is, man. I mean, maybe the mastery isn't just. I mean, maybe the mastery is being the jack of all trades. I mean, that's.
it is.
mean,
No,
yeah, you
I
can-
think it definitely. Like, I've now flipped my belief on all of that.
Yeah.
Explain Leonardo da Vinci.
I mean, dude, a lot of my family, they live abroad, like in places like Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and every time I visit, I'm like, dude, these are real men. And
These are real
I know-
testosterone
I know
levels.
It sounds like I'm saying
Oh, yeah.
I'm the shit or whatever, but no, it legitimately. There's a big difference between a man here and a man there.
Yep.
Over there, they're able to do anything at any given moment. Like if something random happens, they just know how to do something. You know what I mean? Like you get your car flips over, they'll flip it back. There's no need to call a towing truck. Like it's just like how'd you figure that out? You know? And it's just it's a lifestyle.
Yep.
And the way you define life slowly makes you realize that you have a responsibility to withhold, and that responsibility includes these skills, and these skills are from every direction, which makes you more of a whole, like a
You're
whole
whole-ass
ass
person, bro.
I don't know how to say this, but you know, you're more of a whole ass person.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
rather than just cornered.
Here's a question. Is there a difference between biodynamic farming and regenerative farming? Or is it the same thing?
See, I don't. That's actually a great question that I can't give an answer on. there's so many terms like talking again before the podcast on orthomolecular farming. I'm just trying to learn it all. I don't know a whole
I
lot
learned
on.
about that from you, by the way. When I came across that episode, I was like, "What the fuck is orthomolecular?"
Yeah.
That's another level.
So there's just like so many terms that I still don't fully know about, but that's also why I'm going at a collaborative, and so I don't know.
Because I know
Because there's biodynamic, there's permaculture, but there's a lot of blending into with certain principles and whatnot. But above all else, a lot of it is just figuring out how nature operates in the land that you steward. Because that's one thing too with 1 acre of land. If you take like Joel Salatin, for example, he'll just start rambling about just how to go about this piece of land. But if we were going to go on there, we just think it's just a piece of grass. But there's so much you can do on that acre of land. And so, yeah, it's wild when thinking about that. You have to start learning about the actual soil quality, but then the natural grasses and the natural animals, predators, all of that, and really starting to understand like where the water's at and just everything just within that acre. Because say an acre in Northern California is way different than an acre in Arizona desert. And so there's just so many variables in all of that too. So yeah, I know that's not an answer, but I have no.
No, I admire it, and I admire your willingness to learn about that too, and just go on a road trip. Not many people are willing to do that, so props to you.
I'm just picturing an acre because I've seen an acre in person, and then when you mentioned 240 acres.
So an acre is essentially like a football field.
Okay.
So because I try to visualize that too, it's hard, but yeah, essentially 1 acre is around 1 football field. So yeah, 240 football fields. So that's another thing too to go on that. I think that's a good. So when we talk about like glyphosate and just all the sprays, so specifically with produce like corn, soy, and wheat. So some of these farms are 10,000 acres. So that's 5,000 football fields. And so so that's why a lot of them have like helicopters and they're spraying all of this because it takes away the manual labor. But that's why too is there's not a lot of people in it. But then you have to manage 5,000 football fields. That's a lot.
Oh my god!
Is there a way to do that without the pesticides, glyphosate?
So
that would make sense with at least modern technology.
So that's the tough question to be answered with regenerative right now. It can be done on a small scale, but even like White Oak, they made a post a couple days ago. They think it can't scale. But then there's other regenerative farmers that think they can. Like it can be replicated, but to them, to White Oak, they're saying it's not scalable. But then there's other regenerative farmers that think it can be. So that's why we need to be collaborative and test this out because we really don't know.
The only way to scale is to have a bunch of little farms everywhere around the country doing the same thing.
Yeah, and then also we'll see if maybe like putting minds together and work with farms that already have these thousands of acres and test that out. That's because I've had his name's Stephen McBee on my podcast of McBee Farms. They have a lot of acres, and he's trying to use parts of it to test out regenerative methods to see how that works, and then test it out on all of them. But as it stands, it seems like it's really tough to do regeneratively raised for that scale. But on a small scale, absolutely, and that's been proven.
Yeah. One thing I hear, and I used to do this too, I would avoid going to like a strawberry field on a farm, right? And just pick strawberries up from there because of the price difference. It took me a long time to learn that store-bought strawberries are not good for you. Even if you have 300 of them, you won't reach any kind of minimum threshold for nutrients. Density out the door is out the window. So it took me a long time to understand that even though you're paying a higher ticket price, that's what your body needs. And just to like make this clear, I think the message here is to inform people that you're not as healthy as you think until you make the switch, essentially. Lay off. Like, what do you think of you personally, Zaid? I don't know if you might know about this, but multivitamins.
Largely garbage.
Are
Wrong forms
there
of
good ones?
vitamins, wrong combinations.
Would you say there are good ones out there?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, but they're few and far between.
Are they comparable to real food?
If it's organic, real food grown in the way that he's talking about, no.
No, hell no.
No.
Right?
Because it's a food
Much
complex. The whole is greater than the sum of its
Yeah.
parts. You can't just isolate a fucking vitamin, put it into a pill, and like, yeah, it equates the same thing.
Exactly. And that's the thing. Society, remember we were talking about cheat codes earlier, where they're like, why would I eat so much fruit during the day if I could just have 2 pills? Well, it's not the same.
Nope.
It's flawed thinking.
That's what I'm getting at here.
Yeah.
This is great on strawberries. So I can give example on when I worked on the farm, because we had strawberries and raspberries.
Mhm.
It was very time intensive, and most strawberries that we picked were already eaten off by worms. So this is where sprays come into play with pesticides, insecticides. It requires so much more labor. The yield was not nearly as good. The fruit tasted immaculate, but then that's why you're pretty much getting like 1 out of every 10 strawberries that you planted, at least on that. And in that time I was there, I don't know if it changed over time or whatnot, but consumers have no idea because again, they don't see that and they've never worked actually picking strawberries and picking up and there's worms that ate it or this or that. And then you can only get a small amount of yield and then you price it at what you have to price it at, and the consumers come and complain about the price of that because they see strawberries on XYZ that's $1 or $2 cheaper. It's a very tough problem, and that's why, again, above all else, you have to go see it for yourself to really understand the work it takes to produce food for us.
Yeah, and I wish people can just taste the difference. Like, if that's what you're going based off of, and that would convince you to buy it, even though it's $8 more expensive.
It's insane.
Or even just see the difference, man.
Not even see, dude. The thing is the grocery ones look better.
But here's the thing with some
yeah.
foods you can actually see the difference, like with a high quality meat.
Yeah.
Like the fat, even on chicken, lamb,
100%.
pork, or beef,
Yeah.
the fat will actually be orange or deep yellow, correct? Because of carotenoid content.
For people to break that ice, I think fruit is an easy way to get in.
Well, here's the question. Is it worth eating berries, strawberries in general from stores, even if it says it's organic?
I still do.
Okay.
So,
I mean, they are pretty good. So yeah, fair enough.
Makes me feel better. Yeah.
but even like you said, like the fruit looks good. That's actually a good point because so on that farm I worked on, they had so many tomatoes. It was actually a bitch to put into the trucks for farmers markets.
I can only imagine.
But they were like, but if you were to like look at them and all you've done is buy tomatoes from the grocery store, you would never buy these because they look terrible. But because I remember going into that town again and going to the grocery store and seeing shiny red tomatoes. They all look the same. But then I remember buying one and the taste was so bad compared to these tomatoes that I had on that farm. And that's just another example because again, it's crazy how different it is.
Dude, and the thing is like, I bet you some people have never tasted a real one.
No,
They think
definitely
that's
not.
what it tastes like.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't like tomatoes,
dude,
bro.
Remember, I went to Jordan.
Yeah.
And I went to the farmer's market with my cousins. Okay. We picked up like random fruit, mango, strawberry, banana, like whatever, cool. And I take one bite and I'm like, I got this rush of like sweet, new flavor. I'm like,
You get
yo.
goosebumps.
I was like, yo, that is a strawberry.
Yes.
Like that. I'm like, how have I never tasted one in my life?
That's why literally
Like-
that ranch I had with that meat, like that beef and the garlic, that was literally a life-changing meal. Since that day forward, I was like, how can I get people to experience that same thing? Because that goes back to the awareness side. Like we have no idea the food that we should be eating and how it should taste is nothing like what we've had in grocery stores for as long as we've lived. It's insane.
Mm-hmm.
What do you I mean, outside of the, develop a relationship with your local farmer if you can, because that I think is the essential pillar and the most important piece. What are some other practical tips for people, especially people who are in cities? Let's say an environment like what you saw outside where we are. What can people do practically to at least develop a healthy relationship with what you're talking about?
I'm going to shamelessly plug Regenaissance and follow my brand.
There we go.
But then if you're in a city, there's creative ways because we've got community gardens. I mean, there's all kinds of events now because it is starting to pick up with like food. And so people are starting to host events and whatnot, especially in like LA and Austin and other cities. So again, that goes back to just having to do some Google search or like Meetup. And if not, then take it upon yourself to do some events too.
What do you make of growing your own garden?
For sure. If you have the space, I would definitely try to do that. And that's why it's really hard in cities because I'm trying to think about that too. Because I've lived in Austin since 2018, and I know in houses and whatnot, if you're renting a house or have a small backyard, then you can definitely have a garden, even some chickens. But then if you live in like an apartment, that's really tough.
Yeah.
So I know that there's ways to grow some small little like pot plants you can put on your deck. So that's one way. Going to farmers markets for sure. I know saying like it's social, but I mean all the major cities have farmers markets. So I would definitely go to that and just have conversations.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, definitely support the farmers and ranchers too, but just having one conversation, because I know as a society too, with something that's completely new to us, to where talking to farmer and rancher can be intimidating for people, but it's really not. Once you start talking with them, I mean, some farmers and ranchers too are very old school, and so it is intimidating. But if you live in these major cities, you're not gonna really experience that because that's like the super rural areas.
Yeah.
Outside of that, would really just on social media follow the right accounts and just try to support what they're sharing and whatnot, and just educate yourself. That's why I shamelessly plug my brand, because moving forward, I have so much media I'm sharing. I've got the podcast. I just released my Substack. There's a lot I'm doing on my website, and then I'm doing the 6-month road trip to where I have so much interviews and farm tours and educational videos that I'll be sharing. I'm trying to think outside of that. There's really
I mean, buy local, at least start thinking about this.
try to
That's the most
find, because I know there's some small grocery stores too, depending on where you're at, that try to source locally too. So I would try to find those if that exists. And then lastly too, if you can find something online that ships beef or something to you at your door, that's another good avenue to take. So I'm just going to plug some maps: regenerativefarmersofamerica.com, beefmaps.com, fromthefarm.org, eatwild.com. All of those have farm maps. There is Weston A. Price Foundation. They have a map for raw milk. I think it's called getrawmilk.com. Those two maps are to find raw milk. And all of that has just so many resources of education too. Because again, if we can start supporting directly American farmers and ranchers, that decentralizes that. But then also thinking long term, if we want the food system that we want, you've got to do that.
Yeah.
Because if you're supporting from grocery stores that you have no idea where it's coming from, and it's clearly not supported locally or whatnot, then you really are just still you're still part of the problem, essentially.
Yeah. Well, you're doing really important work that's going to structure humanity, and I think your journey is incredible. I love what you're doing. I think more people need to take accountability to make this a priority in terms of importance in their life, because this is where we came from, essentially. There were no Albertsons or Ralphs or Stater Brothers back in the day. And yeah, I think it's just a matter of reconnecting with your true self. It's kind of how we were.
Any last words?
When Adam came, he didn't eat an apple from Albertsons. That's all I'm saying. All right. That's all I'm going to say, man.
This fucking guy and his jokes.
All right.
I love that.
Any last words? Any last message? We'll plug all your links down below. So,
Raw is law.
raw is law.
Raw is law. I love that, guys. Not just milk. It is the law.
Yes.
All right, Ryan, thank you so much for coming on here. It was a pleasure. And we're going to plug all your stuff in the description below. Everybody go ahead and follow him. Great work, man. I wish you the best of luck. And I really enjoyed our conversation today.
Yeah, thank you too for having me.
Very proud of
Of
you,
course,
man.
man. Thank you.